Elena stared at David's hand gripping Rebecca's arm, seeing the white marks his fingers were leaving on her skin. "Let her go," Elena said quietly. "Or what?" David's voice was cold as winter. "Or I call the police and tell them about your bigamy, your fraud, and whatever else you've been hiding." David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Elena, you have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then tell me." Elena pulled out her phone. "Tell me what Jessica in Portland really knows about you. Tell me why Maria in Phoenix hasn't answered her phone in 3 days." For the first time, David looked genuinely surprised. "You called them." "I tried to. Jessica's number goes straight to voicemail. Maria's been disconnected." Elena watched David's face carefully. "Where are they, David?" "How would I know?" But Elena saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. "Oh my God," Rebecca whispered, finally understanding. "What did you do to them?" David released Rebecca's arm and took a step back. "I didn't do anything to anyone." Elena's mind raced. The woman in Miami. Angel. When was the last time you saw her? "Elena, stop. When was the last time anyone saw her?" David's composure was cracking. "You're being paranoid." "Am I? Or am I finally seeing who you really are?" Upstairs, Sophie's crying had stopped. The sudden silence was somehow more terrifying than the sobs. "I need to check on Sophie," Rebecca said, moving toward the stairs. David blocked her path. "I said I'll handle it." "David, she's my daughter. She's our daughter. And she doesn't need to see her mother hysterical right now." Elena realized with growing horror that David wasn't just controlling Rebecca's movements. He was controlling her access to her own child. "How long has he been doing this to you?" Elena asked Rebecca directly. "Doing what?" "Controlling who you talk to. When you can see Sophie, what you can say to her." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. "Rebecca, look at me." "How long?" "It's not. He just wants what's best for Sophie. By isolating her from her mother, by protecting her from confusion," David snapped. "Sophie doesn't need to hear her mother second-guessing every decision I make." Elena felt sick. "You've been gaslighting them both." "I've been providing stability." "By making them dependent on you? By making them afraid to question you?" David's mask was slipping completely now. "Elena, you need to understand something. I've built a life here. A real family. And I'm not going to let you destroy that. The way you destroyed Jessica's life? Maria's life. I never hurt anyone." "Then call them. Right now. Call Jessica and Maria and prove they're okay." David hesitated just long enough for Elena to know she was right. "You can't, can you? Because something happened to them when they got too close to the truth." "Elena, you're being ridiculous." But Elena could see the panic in his eyes now. "What happens to the women who threaten to expose you, David? What happens when we become inconvenient?" Rebecca had gone completely pale. "David, what is she talking about?" "Nothing. Elena's trying to scare you." "Then prove it," Elena said. "Call Jessica right now." David pulled out his phone, but his hands were shaking. Elena watched him scroll through his contacts, and she realized he was stalling. "You can't call her because she's not there to answer, is she?" "Elena, stop. What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything." The shout echoed through the house, and Elena heard Sophie's bedroom door creak open upstairs. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice was small and scared. "Why are you yelling?" David's face changed instantly. When he looked up the stairs, he was the loving father again. "Sorry, princess. Daddy just got a little frustrated. Go back to your room, okay? Can I come down?" "I want to hug you." Elena saw David's internal struggle. He wanted to comfort Sophie, but he also needed to maintain control of the situation downstairs. "In a few minutes, baby. Let the grown-ups finish talking first." Sophie disappeared back into her room, and David's mask slipped again. "Elena, you need to leave." "No. I'm not going anywhere until I know Sophie and Rebecca are safe." David's laugh was bitter. "Safe? From what?" "From you." The words hung in the air between them. "I would never hurt my daughter." "What about her mother? What about me?" What about the other women you've been involved with? David was quiet for a long moment. Elena, there are things about me you don't understand. Then help me understand. David walked to the window and stared out at the street. I've never been good at endings. Elena felt her blood turn to ice. What does that mean? It means that when relationships become complicated, I prefer to simplify them. Rebecca grabbed Elena's arm. We need to leave. Right now. But David was blocking the only exit. Nobody's leaving, he said quietly. Not until we figure this out. Elena looked around the room, really seeing it for the first time. The furniture was positioned so that David could see all the entrances. The windows had locks she hadn't noticed before. There were no phones except the cell phones they'd brought with them. This wasn't just David's second home. It was his fortress. How many women, David? Elena's voice was steady despite her fear. How many women have there been before us? David turned from the window slowly. Does it matter? It matters to their families. It matters to the people who loved them. Elena, you're creating problems that don't exist. Am I? Then why do you look terrified right now? David's composure finally shattered completely. Because you're threatening everything I've built. Everything I've worked for. By telling the truth? By destroying my family. Elena realized they weren't talking about the same thing. Which family, David? Which one of your families are you most worried about losing? David looked up the stairs towards Sophie's room. The one that matters most. Elena followed his gaze and felt her heart break. Because she understood now. David wasn't just a serial manipulator. He was a man who collected families until he found the perfect one. And Sophie was his perfect child. What happens to the imperfect families? Elena whispered. David didn't answer, but Rebecca suddenly gasped. The boxes, she whispered. What boxes? Elena asked. In the basement. David said they were business files, but Rebecca's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. But what? They're labeled with women's names. Jessica, Maria, Caroline. Elena's blood turned to ice. Caroline? Who's Caroline? Rebecca looked at David with growing horror. You told me Caroline was your college girlfriend who died in a car accident. She did die in a car accident, David said quietly. After you were done with her? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. David's silence was answer enough. Elena felt the room spinning around her. How many, David? How many women are in those boxes? Elena, you're misunderstanding. How many? The scream brought Sophie running down the stairs. Daddy, Mommy, what's wrong? Sophie burst into the living room and saw the three adults standing in positions that looked like a standoff. Why does everyone look scared? Sophie asked, her voice small. Elena looked at this innocent little girl and realized that Sophie was the only person in the room who still believed her father was a good man. Sophie, sweetheart, Elena said gently, can you do something for me? Elena, don't, David warned. Can you go upstairs and call 911 on Mommy's phone? Sophie looked confused. Why? Because the grown-ups need help, and sometimes when grown-ups need help, we call the police. Elena. David's voice was sharp with panic. But Sophie was already looking around the room with new eyes. She might be 7, but she wasn't stupid. She could feel the tension. She could see the fear on her mother's face. Daddy, are you in trouble? David knelt down to Sophie's level, and for a moment, Elena saw genuine pain in his eyes. Sophie, Daddy has made some mistakes. Some big mistakes. But I need you to know that everything I did because I love you more than anything in the world. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. What kind of mistakes? Elena watched David struggle with how much truth to tell his daughter. Daddy has been lying to people, including you and Mommy. About what? David glanced at Elena, then back at Sophie. About having other families. Other people I was supposed to take care of. Sophie processed this with the brutal honesty of a child. So you have other kids like me? Yes. And other wives like Mommy? Yes. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Are they nice? The innocent question broke Elena's heart. Here was a child trying to understand if she had to share her father's love with people she'd never met. They were very nice, David said softly. Elena caught the past tense. Were? David looked up at Elena, and she saw something in his eyes that made her grab Rebecca's hand. Sophie, go upstairs right now, Elena said firmly. But, right now. Sophie ran upstairs, and Elena heard her bedroom door slam. Elena, you need to understand, David said, standing slowly. I never meant for it to go this far. How far? How far did it go with Jessica? With Maria? They were going to destroy everything. They were going to tell Sophie. They were going to take her away from me. So you made sure they couldn't? David's silence stretched between them like a chasm. Rebecca was backing toward the stairs. I need to get Sophie. We need to leave. Nobody's leaving, David said again. Not until we figure out how to fix this. There is no fixing this, Elena said. You've been living multiple lives, manipulating multiple women, and when they became inconvenient, you made them disappear. I never wanted to hurt anyone, but you did hurt them. You hurt all of us. David looked broken suddenly. Elena, do you know what it's like to lose everything? To have the perfect family and then watch it slip away? What are you talking about? Caroline wasn't my college girlfriend. She was my first wife. My real wife. We had a baby on the way. Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. What happened to them? Car accident. Black ice. Caroline was 8 months pregnant. Elena's heart broke for the man David might have been before tragedy destroyed him. I lost everything in one night, David continued. My wife. My child. My future. Everything. So you decided to create new families? To replace what you lost? I decided to make sure I never lost everything again. If I had multiple families, multiple children, I could never lose them all at once. Elena stared at this broken man who'd tried to hedge his bets against loss by collecting people like insurance policies. But David, you can't keep people like possessions. When they realized what you were doing, they were going to leave. They were going to take my children away from me. So you stopped them. David's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't lose Sophie. She's everything Caroline and our baby should have been. Elena realized she was looking at a man who'd been so destroyed by loss that he'd become a monster trying to prevent it from happening again. David, what happened to Jessica and Maria? David was quiet for so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. They're in a place where they can't hurt Sophie anymore. The words chilled Elena to her bones. Are they alive? They're safe. That's not what I asked. David looked up the stairs towards Sophie's room. They can't hurt my daughter now. That's all that matters. Elena felt her phone buzzing in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. Elena, this is Jessica in Portland. I'm alive. I escaped. The police are on their way to Rebecca's house. Get out now. Elena's hands shook as she showed the message to Rebecca. David saw their faces change. What is it? Jessica escaped, Elena said quietly. David's face went white. That's impossible. She texted me. The police are coming. For the first time since Elena had known him, David looked genuinely terrified. Sophie, he whispered. They'll take Sophie away from me. David, you need to turn yourself in. You need to get help. I can't lose her, Elena. She's all I have left of the man I used to be. Elena heard sirens in the distance. Daddy? Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs. There are police cars outside. David looked up at his daughter with pure heartbreak in his eyes. Sophie, Daddy has to go away for a while. Where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can get better. Sophie ran down the stairs and threw her arms around David. I don't want you to go. Elena watched this man hold his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. And maybe she was. Maybe Sophie was the only real love David had left in his damaged heart. I love you, princess, David whispered into Sophie's hair. More than all the stars in the sky. You remember that, okay? I love you too, Daddy. The police were at the door now. Elena could hear them talking to each other, planning their approach. Rebecca, David said quietly. Take care of Sophie. Make sure she knows that everything I did because I loved her. David. Promise me. Rebecca nodded through her tears. I promise. David kissed Sophie's forehead one last time, then walked to the front door. He opened it himself, hands raised, before the police could break it down. I'm David Chin, he said calmly. I think you're looking for me. Elena watched through the window as they put handcuffs on her husband. This man who'd shared her bed for 12 years. This stranger who'd lived a life so complex she was still discovering its depths. Sophie was sobbing in Rebecca's arms. Why are they taking Daddy away? Because Daddy made some very bad choices, Rebecca said gently. And now he has to face the consequences. Elena knelt down next to Sophie. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Sometimes people do terrible things because they're so afraid of losing the people they love. Sophie looked at Elena with David's eyes. Are you going to leave too? Elena looked at this little girl who was the innocent victim of her father's damaged love. No, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Can you imagine making that promise to a child whose father just destroyed both your lives? 3 months later, Elena sat in a coffee shop across from Rebecca, watching Sophie play in the small playground outside the window. How is she doing? Elena asked. Better than I expected. Kids are resilient. She's in therapy, which helps. And you? Rebecca smiled sadly. Also in therapy. Turns out being manipulated for 8 years leaves some scars. They sat in comfortable silence, two women who'd been bonded by shared trauma and unexpected friendship. Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still love him? Elena watched Sophie push herself higher on the swing set. I love the man I thought he was. The man who held me through my darkest moments, even though I now know those moments were partly his creation. That's not really an answer. Elena sighed. I love the David who existed in quiet moments when he forgot to be manipulative. When he was just human. But that David was probably just another character he played. Jessica visited last week, Rebecca said quietly. Elena looked up sharply. How is she? Scared. But alive. David kept her locked in a cabin for 2 months. He told her it was for her own safety, that Elena was dangerous and trying to hurt Oliver. Elena felt sick. He used me as the villain in her story. He used all of us as villains in each other's stories. That's how he kept us isolated. Sophie ran over to their table, her cheeks flushed from playing. Elena, will you come to my school play next week? Elena smiled. I wouldn't miss it. Sophie beamed and ran back to the playground. She's asked me to legally change her last name, Rebecca said. To what? Chin. She wants to keep her father's name, even after everything. Elena felt her heart squeeze. What did you tell her? That it's her choice. That she gets to decide how much of him she wants to carry forward. Elena watched Sophie laugh as she slid down the slide. This little girl who would grow up knowing her father's love was real, even if everything else about him was a lie. Rebecca, what happens now? For all of us. We heal. We help Sophie understand that love doesn't have to be possessive or controlling. We show her what healthy relationships look like. And David. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. David is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. But Sophie will always be his daughter. And somehow we have to help her navigate loving someone who did terrible things. Elena nodded. It wasn't fair that Sophie had to carry that burden. But maybe, with help, she could learn to love her father's memory without repeating his mistakes. Elena? Yeah? Thank you. For finding the courage to confront him. For saving all of us. Elena looked at Sophie, who was now teaching another child how to pump her legs on the swing. She saved us, Elena said quietly. Sophie, the love David felt for her was the only real thing about him. And that love, however twisted, led him to make mistakes that exposed the truth. They sat together, watching this remarkable little girl who'd inherited her father's smile, but hopefully her mother's heart. As the sun set over the playground, Elena realized something profound. Sometimes the people who break us also teach us how strong we really are. And sometimes, the love that destroys us also shows us what real love should never be. Sophie would grow up knowing both truths. And maybe Elena thought that knowledge would make her wise in ways her father never was. Love isn't something you collect or control, it's something you set free, trusting it will choose to stay.